Excuse me, officer. Could you tell me why I've been pulled over? Get out of the car, now!
Now!
She reached for her ID. He slammed his hand on the roof.
Stutter?
Did I stutter?
Get your
ass
out.
out. You don't belong in this neighborhood, and you damn well
know
know it. He turned to his partner and laughed. Bet this ride's stolen. A neighbor across the street held up a phone, recording, grinning. Nobody helped. A 68-year-old mother sat frozen in the passenger seat, gripping her cane, watching her daughter be humiliated under flashing blue lights. But what Sergeant Prescott didn't know was that in just a few hours, he'd be the one trembling, standing at attention, while his own chief announced the 3 words that would destroy his entire career. Yeah, you can already tell this went way too far. Let's get into the story. Let me take you back, about 2 hours before those blue lights ever flashed. Brenda Williams sat at a corner table inside Magnolia's, a small southern restaurant on the east side of Richmond, Virginia. White tablecloths, candles flickering in mason jars, the smell of brown butter and fresh cornbread drifting from the kitchen. Across from her sat her mother, Denise Calloway, 68 years old, retired schoolteacher, the kind of woman who still called every young man baby and carried peppermints in her purse for strangers' children. Tonight was Denise's birthday. Not a big party, no crowd, just a daughter and her mama sharing a meal. The way they'd done it every year for as long as Brenda could remember. Denise was telling a story about the waiter, a tall kid, maybe 22, who had called her beautiful when he brought the dessert menu. She was laughing so hard, her glasses fogged up. Mama, he was being polite. Polite? Baby, that boy winked at me. Twice. Brenda shook her head, smiling. She cut a piece of sweet potato pie and slid it across the table. Denise swatted her hand away and pulled the whole plate closer. This was peace. This was a Friday night. You wouldn't know, looking at Brenda in that moment, that 3 days ago she had been confirmed as a federal district court judge for the Eastern District of Virginia. You wouldn't know that on Monday morning, just 60 hours from now, she would stand in a packed courtroom, raise her right hand, and take the oath that would make her one of the youngest black female federal judges in the history of the state. 20 years she had climbed to get here. Fresh out of law school, she started as a public defender in Norfolk. The cases no one wanted. Drug possession, petty theft, kids who reminded her of the boys she grew up with. She fought for every single one of them. Then she moved into civil rights litigation, police brutality, wrongful arrest, racial profiling. She spent a decade documenting the exact kind of abuse that most people only saw in headlines. She didn't just read about it, she held the hands of the people who lived it. From there, the appellate court, and then, 3 days ago, the call from Washington. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, she was just Denise's daughter, slacks and a blouse, reading glasses tucked into her collar. No title, no robes, no security detail, just 2 women, cornbread, sweet potato pie, and a birthday. They left the restaurant around 8:30. The autumn air was cool, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke from a neighbor's fireplace. Crickets hummed in the hedges along the sidewalk. Brenda held her mother's arm as Denise steadied herself with her cane, stepping carefully off the curb. She helped Denise into the passenger seat, buckled her in, walked around to the driver's side. The silver sedan pulled out of the parking lot and turned onto Route 14, heading toward Whitmore Heights, the quiet, affluent suburb where Denise had lived for the past 11 years. Whitmore Heights, manicured lawns, American flags on porches, streets so clean you could eat off them. The kind of neighborhood where people waved at each other but locked their doors the second someone unfamiliar walked by. Brenda turned on the radio. Gospel, low volume. Denise hummed along, her head resting against the window, eyes half closed. The dashboard glowed warm amber. The road was nearly empty. It was the kind of night where nothing was supposed to go wrong. Then Brenda noticed the headlights. They appeared about 3 blocks back, bright, steady, keeping pace. She changed lanes. The headlights changed lanes. She signaled a turn. The headlights followed. She glanced at the speedometer. 33 in a 35 zone. 2 miles under the limit, both taillights working. She had checked them that morning, the way she always did. A habit from her years representing clients who had been pulled over for equipment violations that didn't exist. She signaled again. Perfectly. Deliberately. The headlights stayed right behind her. Denise opened one eye. "Somebody's following us, baby?" Brenda looked in the rearview mirror. "Probably nothing, Mama." But her hands tightened on the steering wheel. 10 and 2. The way she always held them when she saw those lights behind her. Not because she was taught in driving school, because she was taught by being black in America. The blue lights hit the rearview mirror like an explosion. Brenda's stomach dropped. Not because she was guilty, because she already knew how this would go. She pulled the sedan to the right, slow and smooth. Tires crunching on the gravel shoulder. She put the car in park, turned off the engine, placed both hands on the steering wheel, 10 and 2, and waited. Denise sat up straight. Her hand found her cane. "Lord, what now?" "It's okay, Mama. Just stay still. Don't say anything." Brenda watched in the side mirror as the patrol car door swung open. A tall figure stepped out. Broad shoulders. Slow, deliberate walk. One hand resting on his belt, near the holster. The red and blue lights strobed across the trees, painting everything in sharp, ugly flashes. Sergeant Dale Prescott. 15 years on the force, 3 commendations on his wall, 14 complaints in his file, every single one from a black or Latino resident, every single one dismissed. He was the kind of cop who believed his badge didn't just give him authority, it made him untouchable. He didn't walk to the car the way a normal officer approaches a routine stop. He swaggered, chest out, chin up, like a man walking into a room he already owned. His boots ground into the gravel with each step, slow and deliberate, as if time itself was something he controlled. He reached the driver's window and shone his flashlight directly into Brenda's face. Not at the car, not at the interior, at her eyes. The beam was blinding, hot and white. She squinted but didn't flinch, didn't look away. Then the beam swung to Denise, held there for a long, uncomfortable second. Denise raised one hand to shield her face, her bracelets clinking softly against each other. Prescott didn't say good evening, didn't introduce himself, didn't explain the stop. License and registration. 3 words. Flat. Cold. Like he was ordering food he didn't plan to pay for. Brenda kept her voice steady. "Of course, officer. May I reach into my purse?" "Did I say you could talk?" "License. Registration. Now." She moved slowly, carefully. Every movement is deliberate. Every gesture visible. She opened her purse, pulled out her wallet, and handed over her driver's license and vehicle registration. Prescott snatched them without looking. He held the license up to the flashlight, glanced at the photo, then looked back at Brenda, like the two didn't match. "This your car?" "Yes, sir." "Where'd you get it?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Not, "Where are you headed tonight?" Not, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Where did you get this car? As if a black woman driving a clean sedan through this neighborhood needed to explain how she could possibly afford it. Brenda swallowed. "I purchased it 2 years ago. The registration is right there in your hand, officer." Prescott ignored her answer completely. He leaned down further into the window, shining the flashlight across the back seat. Empty. Clean. A leather briefcase sitting upright. A small bakery box. Denise's leftover birthday cake. Where are you coming from? Dinner. A restaurant on the east side. Where are you going? Taking my mother home. She lives in this neighborhood. Prescott pulled back and looked at Denise, then back at Brenda. His lips curled into something that was almost a smile, but carried no warmth at all. She lives here? In Whitmore Heights? Yes, sir. 11 years. He let out a short breath through his nose, half laugh, half grunt, like the idea of this woman belonging here was the funniest thing he'd heard all week. He straightened up, tapped the roof of the car twice with his flashlight. A slow, deliberate tap, tap. The kind a man does when he's already decided what happens next and he's just enjoying the build-up. Step out of the vehicle. Brenda's hand stayed on the wheel. Officer, could you please tell me the reason for the stop? I said step out. I have a right to know why I've been... You got a busted taillight. That's why. Now step out of the vehicle before I add resisting to the list. Don't make me say it again. A busted taillight. Brenda knew, absolutely knew, that both taillights were working. She had checked them this morning. She checked them every single morning. A habit she developed years ago, representing clients who had been pulled over for equipment violations that never actually existed. But she also knew, from years of handling cases exactly like this one, that arguing on the side of a dark road with a hostile officer would not end well. Not for her. Not for her 68-year-old mother sitting 3 feet away. She opened the door slowly, stepped out, kept her hands visible at all times. The autumn air hit her face, cool and damp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from a distant fireplace. Gravel crunched under her shoes. The red and blue strobes painted her silhouette against the pavement in flashing intervals. Prescott stepped back, hand still resting near his holster, and looked her up and down, head to toe, slowly. The way a man looks at something he's already decided is beneath him. Hands on the vehicle. Brenda placed her palms flat on the roof of her own car. The metal was cold. She could feel the vibration of the engine ticking as it cooled. That's when the second patrol car pulled up. Officer Craig Loomis, late 20s, sandy hair, a newer officer, only 2 years on the force. He stepped out and walked over quickly, a little too eagerly, like a kid arriving late to a game he didn't fully understand. What do we got, Sarge? Prescott jerked his thumb toward the passenger side. Old lady in the front seat. Keep an eye on her. Don't let her reach for nothing. Old lady. That's what he called her. Denise Calloway. A woman who had spent 35 years teaching third graders how to read. A woman who still volunteered at her church every Saturday morning. A woman whose birthday cake was sitting in a box on the back seat of the car she was now afraid to move inside of. Loomis walked to the passenger side and shone his flashlight through the window. Denise stared up at him, confused and frightened. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her cane. Ma'am, keep your hands where I can see them. Denise's voice was barely a whisper. Baby, I'm just holding my cane. Hands, where I can see them. Now. Denise lifted both hands off her cane. It slipped from her grip, clattered against the door panel, and fell into the footwell with a hollow thud. She didn't pick it up. She just sat there, palms open, fingers shaking, like a child who'd been told to freeze and was too terrified to ask why. Back on the driver's side, Prescott was in no rush. He held Brenda's license up again, tilting it back and forth in the flashlight beam, as if looking for a flaw. Brenda Williams, that you? Yes. Uh-huh. He tucked the license into his shirt pocket. Not his clipboard, not his scanner, his breast pocket, like it belonged to him now. I'm gonna hold on to this for a minute. Officer, that's my property. Did I ask you a question? Silence. The crickets had stopped. Even the dog down the block had gone quiet. Prescott walked a slow circle around the car. He crouched at the rear and stared at the taillights. Both of them were glowing. Bright. Red. Perfectly functional. Not a crack, not a flicker. He stared at them for a long, long second. He didn't say a word about it. He just stood up, adjusted his belt, and walked back to Brenda like nothing had happened. He leaned in close enough that she could smell the stale coffee on his breath, the faint tang of cheap aftershave. And he spoke low, almost a whisper, the kind of voice meant to remind someone exactly who holds the power. Here's how this is gonna work. I'm gonna search for this vehicle, and you're gonna stand right here and keep your mouth shut while I do it. Are we clear? Brenda's jaw tightened. Her pulse drummed against her throat, but her voice came out level, controlled, the voice of a woman who had spent 2 decades in courtrooms. I do not consent to a search of my vehicle. Prescott smiled, the kind of smile that never once touches the eyes. Wasn't asking for your permission, sweetheart. Inside the car, sitting upright on the back seat, was Brenda's leather briefcase. Inside it, her judicial appointment letter, signed by the President of the United States, her federal court credentials, her official ID badge for the Eastern District Courthouse, a formal invitation to her own investiture ceremony, scheduled for Monday morning. Everything Prescott would have needed to understand exactly who he was dealing with. He never even opened it. Across the street, a porch light flicked on. A man in a bathrobe stepped outside, arms folded, watching the entire scene like it was evening television. He didn't call out. He didn't come any closer. Next door, a woman parted her blinds, peered through the gap for a few seconds, and let them fall closed again. A car drove past slowly. The driver glanced over, then sped up. Nobody came forward. Nobody asked if everything was all right. Nobody said stop. The red and blue lights kept spinning. The radio on Prescott's shoulder crackled and hissed with static. Somewhere down the block, a sprinkler kicked on, ticking rhythmically in the dark. Brenda Williams, federal judge, civil rights attorney, a woman who had spent 20 years fighting for people in exactly this situation, stood on the side of the road with her palms pressed flat against the cold metal roof of her own car. Waiting. The way she had learned to wait. The way her mother had taught her to wait. The way black women in America have always been taught to wait. Prescott popped the trunk first. He didn't ask, didn't explain. Just walked to the back of the sedan, found the release, and swung it open like he owned the car. The trunk light flickered on, casting a pale yellow glow over the contents inside. A spare tire, a first aid kit, a reusable grocery bag from Trader Joe's. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Prescott stared into that empty trunk for a good 10 seconds. Then he slammed it shut so hard the whole car rocked. Denise flinched in the passenger seat. Her hands were still raised, palms shaking. He moved to the back seat next, pulled open the door, grabbed Denise's purse from the floor, and dumped it upside down across the leather. Everything scattered. Lipstick, reading glasses, a pack of tissues, a small leather Bible, a handful of peppermint candies she always carried for children at church. A prayer card from last Sunday's service slid off the seat and landed face down on the pavement. Prescott didn't pick it up. He stepped on it as he reached deeper into the car. Then he found the bakery box, Denise's leftover birthday cake. He flipped it open, looked inside, and tossed it back onto the seat. A smear of frosting streaked across the leather. "Sarge," Loomis said quietly from the other side, "there's nothing here." Prescott didn't answer. He reached for the briefcase. Brenda's leather briefcase. The one she carried to every courtroom, every meeting, every hearing for the past decade. He unzipped it roughly. Inside were legal pads, manila folders, printed documents. On top of everything sat a cream-colored envelope embossed with the seal of the United States District Court, Eastern District of Virginia. Prescott pulled the envelope halfway out, glanced at it, held it in his hand for maybe 2 seconds. Then he shoved it back into the briefcase, zipped it shut, and tossed the whole thing onto the back seat like a bag of trash. He never opened the envelope. He never read the appointment letter inside. He never looked at the federal court ID clipped to the inside pocket.
He didn't care what was in that briefcase, because he had already decided who Brenda Williams was the moment he saw her face. Prescott walked back to where Brenda stood. His jaw was tight now, angry. He had searched the entire car and found nothing. No drugs, no weapons, no stolen property, nothing illegal, nothing even suspicious. And that made him angrier. Because now he looked like a fool. And men like Prescott would rather double down than admit they were wrong. He stopped in front of her. Close. Too close. She could see the vein pulsing in his neck, smell the coffee and sweat radiating off him. "You think you're smart, don't you?" Brenda said nothing. "Yeah, you think you're real smart. Coming through here with your little briefcase and your nice car, acting like you're better than everybody." "Sergeant, I have cooperated fully. The search found nothing. I'd like to leave now." Prescott laughed. Short, sharp, ugly. He looked over his shoulder at Loomis. "You hear that? She'd like to leave." He turned back, stepped even closer. "Let me tell you something, sweetheart. You leave when I say you leave, not a second before." From the passenger seat, Denise's voice broke through, thin, trembling, but fierce. "Why are you doing this? She hasn't done anything wrong. We just want to go home." Prescott wheeled around and pointed his flashlight at Denise like a weapon. "I told you to shut your mouth, old woman. One more word, and I'm putting you in the car, too. Try me." Denise's lips pressed together. Her chin trembled. Tears rolled down her cheeks, catching the blue strobe light. She didn't speak again. She just sat there, hands up, tears falling, unable to wipe them because she was afraid to move. Loomis shifted his weight. He looked at the ground. He looked at Prescott. Something crossed his face. Doubt, maybe. Guilt. The faintest flicker of a conscience trying to surface. But he didn't speak. He didn't intervene. He just stood there, hands on his belt, and let it happen. Brenda watched her mother cry through the car window, and for the first time all night, her composure cracked. Not on her face. Her face stayed still as stone, but her hands, pressed flat against the roof of the car, were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. She spoke carefully. Every word is measured. "Sergeant, both taillights are functional. You can see that for yourself. Your search produced nothing. You have no probable cause. What you're doing right now is unlawful detention, and I'm asking you, respectfully, to let us go." Prescott tilted his head, smiled that dead-eyed smile again. "Unlawful detention? Oh, you're a lawyer now." "I'm telling you what the law says." "Nah, let me tell you what the law says." He stepped so close she could feel the heat of his breath on her forehead. "Out here? On this road? In the dark? I am the law. And if I say you stay, you stay. And if I say you talk, you talk. And if I say you shut up and spread your hands on this car, that's exactly what you do. Are we clear?" Silence. A car drove past. The headlights swept across the scene. A black woman pressed against her own car, a white officer inches from her face, an elderly woman crying in the passenger seat. The car didn't slow down. It didn't stop. "All right, I gotta stop right here. Nah, this ain't it." She did everything right. Everything. And he's still going? Bro, this isn't policing. This is ego with a badge. And honestly, it's about to get so much worse. Prescott turned to Loomis. Get the old lady out of the car. Loomis hesitated. Sarge, I don't think... Did I ask what you think? Get her out. Now. Loomis opened the passenger door. Denise looked up at him, eyes wide and wet. He reached for her arm, then stopped. He couldn't do it. He stepped back and just held the door open. Ma'am, I need you to step out. Please. Denise reached down for her cane. It had fallen into the footwell. Her fingers fumbled for it, shaking too hard to grip. Loomis bent down and handed it to her. That one small gesture, the only moment of basic decency in this entire nightmare. Denise pulled herself up, one hand on the cane, one on the door frame. Her knees buckled slightly. She steadied herself and stepped onto the gravel. The cold bit through her thin coat. She stood on the shoulder of the road, hunched and small, holding her cane with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Prescott looked at her and shook his head. Search her. Loomis turned. What? You heard me. Pat her down. Sarge, she's 68 years old. She's got a cane. There's no... Pat her down, or I will. Loomis swallowed hard. He stepped toward Denise. She closed her eyes. Her lips moved silently. Another prayer. He ran a quick, barely there pat down her sides. His hands were shaking almost as much as hers. Nothing. Of course nothing. Brenda watched every second of it. She watched a stranger's hands touch her mother. She watched her mother stand on the side of a road, eyes closed, praying, being searched like a criminal on her 68th birthday. Something broke in that moment. Not loudly, not dramatically. It broke the way glass breaks underwater. Silently, completely, all at once. Prescott wasn't done. He walked back to Brenda, pulled her arms behind her back, and she heard the click before she felt the cold. Handcuffs. Metal teeth biting into her wrists. What are you doing? Denise gasped from the curb. Your daughter's under arrest. Resisting a lawful order. Obstruction of justice. She didn't resist anything. She didn't do anything. Ma'am, one more word, and you're coming too. I don't care how old you are. Denise collapsed back against the car, her cane slipping on the gravel. Loomis caught her elbow just before she fell. Brenda felt the cuffs tighten. The metal pinched her skin. She could feel her pulse hammering against the steel. But she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She looked at Prescott one last time. Steady, calm, unblinking. And she said, quietly, so only he could hear, "You're going to regret this, Sergeant. Not because of who I am, because of what you just did." Prescott leaned in and grinned. Sweetheart, the only thing I regret is not cuffing you sooner. He grabbed her arm and walked her to the back of the patrol car, opened the door, pushed her head down. She ducked into the back seat, the hard plastic bench, the cage partition, the stale smell of sweat and disinfectant. The door slammed shut. Through the window, she could see her mother standing alone on the curb, small, shaking, arms wrapped around herself. The birthday cake smeared on the back seat of the sedan. The prayer card is still lying face down on the pavement. The red and blue lights kept spinning. Nobody came to help. The ride to the station took 11 minutes. Brenda counted every one of them. Not out loud, in her head. The way she used to count during depositions, when opposing counsel was trying to rattle her. Steady, measured, controlled. The patrol car smelled like old sweat, stale fast food, and something chemical she couldn't name. The plastic seat was hard and cold beneath her. The handcuffs dug into the small bones of her wrists every time the car hit a bump. She could feel the metal warming against her skin, pressing deeper with every turn. Through the cage partition, she could hear Prescott humming. Actually humming. Like he was driving home from a barbecue. They pulled into the Whitmore Heights police station at 9:47 p.m. Fluorescent lights. A concrete parking lot. The American flag hanging limp on a pole out front. No wind to lift it.
Prescott opened the rear door and pulled Brenda out by the arm. Not gently. He walked her through the front entrance, past the reception desk, past two officers who glanced up from their paperwork and looked away just as fast. Intake. Fingerprints. Mugshot. Brenda Williams. Federal judge. Civil rights attorney. A woman who had argued cases before the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, stood in front of a height chart on a cinder block wall while a bored clerk snapped her photograph. Then the holding cell. A metal bench bolted to the wall. A steel toilet with no seat. The smell of bleach that didn't quite cover what it was supposed to cover. The door clanged shut behind her, the lock engaged with a sound that echoed down the hallway. Prescott didn't even look back. He walked straight to the break room, poured himself a cup of coffee, and sat down across from another officer. "Friday night special," he said, grinning. "Pulled a real mouthy one out of a sedan on Maple.
Her and her mama, acting like they owned the place." The other officer chuckled. "Whitmore Heights? Where else? Driving through like she belongs there." He took a long sip of coffee. "Booked her for obstruction. She'll cool off in there overnight." Back in the holding cell, Brenda sat perfectly still, hands on her knees, wrists throbbing, red marks already forming where the cuffs had bitten in. She was allowed one phone call. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call a friend. She didn't call her husband. She picked up the phone on the wall, dialed a number she knew by heart, and waited for 2 rings. "Judge, it's Brenda. Brenda Williams. I apologize for calling this late." A pause on the other end, then a voice, sharp, alert, immediately serious. "Brenda, what's wrong?" "I'm at Whitmore Heights Police Station. I've been arrested. The charge is obstruction. There was no probable cause. My mother was with me." Silence for 3 seconds. Then, "Don't say another word to anyone. I'm making calls right now." She hung up. What happened next took less than 20 minutes. But inside that station, it felt like an earthquake building underground. Invisible at first, then impossible to ignore. The first call came to the front desk at 10:09 p.m. The district attorney's office. The desk sergeant answered, listened for about 15 seconds, and his face went slack. The second call came at 10:14. The governor's chief of staff. The sergeant put down his coffee and stood up. The third call came at 10:18. The United States Marshal's Service. The sergeant picked up the phone, listened for 10 seconds, and his hands started shaking. Down the hall, Prescott was still in the break room, still laughing, still telling the story of the mouthy woman on Maple. He had no idea that the world he knew was ending one phone call at a time. Then, the front door of the station slammed open. Chief of Police Harold Buchanan, 62 years old, tie crooked, forehead slick with sweat. He had driven from his home in 12 minutes flat, a drive that normally took 25. His shirt was half untucked. One shoe was tied, the other wasn't. He didn't stop at the front desk. He didn't greet anyone. He walked straight to the holding area, shoes squeaking on the linoleum, breathing hard. He looked through the small glass window of the holding cell door, and he saw her. Brenda Williams, sitting on that metal bench, wrists marked red, back straight, eyes steady. The same woman whose hand he had shaken 6 days ago at her confirmation celebration. The same woman he had congratulated, smiled with, posed for a photograph beside. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. He turned to the desk officer. His voice cracked. "Open this door. Right now. Open it." The officer fumbled with the keys. The lock clicked. The door swung open. But Buchanan didn't step inside. Not yet.
He turned around, slowly. He faced the station floor. Every officer at every desk, every clerk behind every counter, every uniform in the building. Prescott had stepped out of the break room now, coffee cup in hand, curious about the commotion. Buchanan straightened his back. He swallowed once, and then he spoke. Loud, clear, his voice shaking but unmistakable. The words echoed off every wall in that building. "All rise for Judge Brenda Williams." The coffee cup hit the floor first. Then the silence. Prescott's face went white. Not pale, white, like every drop of blood had evacuated his body at once. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. His eyes locked on the holding cell door as Brenda stepped through it. She stood in the hallway, back straight, chin level, wrists still bearing the red, swollen marks of his handcuffs. She looked directly at him, not with rage, not with satisfaction, just a calm, absolute certainty that needed no words.
Every officer in the station rose to their feet, one by one, chair legs scraping against the floor. Loomis, standing near the back, was the first to stand. His eyes were wet. Prescott was the last. His legs barely held him. Brenda didn't say a single word. She didn't have to. It took exactly 90 seconds for Prescott's career to end. Buchanan turned to the desk sergeant, voice barely holding together. "Get his badge. Get his weapon. Now." Prescott stood frozen in the hallway. The coffee stain was spreading across the floor at his feet, but he didn't look down. He couldn't stop staring at Brenda. His mouth kept opening and closing, like a fish pulled out of water and dropped on concrete. Chief, hold on. I had no idea she was..." "Shut your mouth, Dale." Buchanan stepped toward him. Close. The way Prescott had stepped toward Brenda on that roadside just 2 hours ago. Same distance, same energy. Except now the power was reversed, and every person in that building could feel it. Badge, gun, on the desk, now. Prescott's hands were shaking so badly he could barely unclip his holster. The weapon clattered onto the counter. Then the badge, the same badge he had tapped against his chest all night like a crown. It landed face down with a dull, metallic thud. "You're suspended, effective immediately, without pay. Go home. Don't talk to the press. Don't set foot in this building until you hear from Internal Affairs." Prescott opened his mouth one more time. "She didn't tell me she shouldn't have had to." That sentence landed like a hammer. Prescott closed his mouth. For the first time all night, he had nothing to say. He was escorted out by 2 officers, the same men he'd been laughing with in the break room 20 minutes earlier. Neither looked at him. The automatic doors slid shut behind him, and the night swallowed him whole. Inside, Buchanan turned to Brenda. His face was gray. "Judge Williams, on behalf of this department, I can't begin to..." Brenda raised one hand, the same hand that still bore the red imprint of Prescott's handcuffs. "Chief Buchanan, where is my mother?" He blinked. An officer drove her home. She's safe." "Was she given her cane back?" A pause. Buchanan turned to the desk sergeant, who scrambled to check. "Yes, ma'am, she has her cane." Brenda nodded. Then she looked at Buchanan the way she would look at a witness who had just contradicted their own testimony. 14 complaints, Chief. 14 against that man, from Black and Latino residents. Every single one dismissed. You signed off on 3 of those dismissals yourself." Buchanan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "This isn't an isolated incident. We both know it." She didn't raise her voice. Every officer in that station heard every word. The room was so quiet, you could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. Brenda turned to the desk sergeant. "I need copies of the arrest report, the booking record, and all dash cam or body camera footage from tonight, preserved, unedited." The sergeant nodded rapidly. "Yes, ma'am. Right away. Then she turned to Loomis. He was standing near the back wall, arms at his sides, eyes red. He looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. "Officer Loomis?" He flinched. "Yes, ma'am." "You were there for all of it. You watched my 68-year-old mother get pulled out of a car and searched on the side of the road on her birthday. You knew it was wrong." His chin dropped. "Yes, ma'am." "There will be an investigation. You can tell the truth now or under oath later. I'd recommend now." Loomis nodded slowly. "I'll cooperate fully, Your Honor. I'm sorry. I should have stopped it." Brenda looked at him for a long moment. "Yes, you should have." She turned and walked toward the exit. Her shoes clicked against the linoleum, steady, unhurried, deliberate. Every officer she passed stood a little straighter. A few lowered their eyes. One young female officer near the front desk was crying silently, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Brenda pushed through the front door and stepped into the night air. Cool, clean, the smell of damp asphalt and distant rain. She stopped on the sidewalk, closed her eyes, and took one long, deep breath. The same woman who had been fingerprinted and photographed in this building an hour ago now stood on its front steps, free, back straight, breathing in the autumn night like she was tasting it for the first time. She pulled out her phone and called her mother. "Mama, I'm coming home. We're okay." On the other end, Denise was crying too hard to answer. But she was home. She was safe. And her cane was beside her. The video hit the internet Saturday morning. The neighbor from Maple Street, the one who had stood on his porch recording while Brenda was handcuffed, uploaded the footage to Twitter at 7:14 a.m. 8 minutes and 32 seconds. Unedited. No filter, no commentary needed. By noon, it had 2 million views. By Sunday evening, 11 million. The footage was brutal in its clarity. You could hear everything. Prescott's voice, sharp and mocking. The handcuffs clicking shut. Denise crying on the curb. And Brenda, silent, still, dignified, being shoved into the back of a patrol car while her 68-year-old mother stood alone on the side of the road, gripping a cane on her birthday. Then Brenda's personal body camera footage was released. The small camera she kept clipped to her bag, a habit from her years as a civil rights attorney. This angle was closer, more intimate. You could see the look in Prescott's eyes when he said, "I and the law." You could see his hand shove the briefcase, the one containing her judicial appointment letter, across the back seat like garbage. 2 angles, 2 cameras, 1 truth. The story didn't just go viral, it detonated. Cynthia Adams broke it wide open. 34 years old, investigative reporter for the Richmond Herald-Tribune. She had been covering police misconduct in Virginia for 6 years, and the moment she saw that footage, she knew this was bigger than one traffic stop. She pulled Prescott's personnel file through a public records request. What she found was a decade of rot. 14 formal complaints, every single one from a Black or Latino resident. Excessive force, racial slurs during arrests, fabricated charges, illegal searches, a pattern so consistent it could have been printed on a calendar. And every single complaint had been reviewed, stamped, and dismissed by the department's Internal Affairs Unit. 3 of those dismissals carried the personal signature of Chief Harold Buchanan. Adams published her first piece Monday morning, front page, above the fold. The headline read, 14 complaints, 0 consequences. Inside the department that arrested a federal judge. By Monday afternoon, the Department of Justice announced a federal civil rights investigation, not just into Prescott, but into the entire Whitmore Heights Police Department. The probe would examine hiring practices, use of force policies, complaint handling procedures, and the department's track record with communities of color. This wasn't about one bad cop anymore. This was about the system that built him, protected him, and turned him loose on the streets with a badge and a gun for 15 years. The trial came fast. Federal prosecutors moved with unusual speed, partly because the evidence was overwhelming, partly because the whole country was watching. Prescott was charged with 4 counts: unlawful detention, violation of civil rights under federal statute, filing a false police report, and abuse of authority. His attorney, Nathan Greer, tried everything. My client followed standard operating procedure for a routine traffic stop. The prosecution played the video. The taillights, both glowing, both functional. The fabricated marijuana claim. The illegal search. Denise's purse dumped across the seat. The prayer card stepped on. The briefcase tossed aside without being opened. Sergeant Prescott exercised reasonable officer discretion based on his training and experience. Loomis took the stand. He testified, quietly, steadily, with his eyes fixed on the floor, that Prescott had told him before the stop that the car looked wrong for this neighborhood, that the marijuana smell was invented, that there was never any probable cause, that he, Loomis, had known it was wrong from the first minute but was too afraid of Prescott to speak up. My client had no knowledge of the defendant's, the victim's judicial status. The prosecutor stood up and said 5 words that silenced the courtroom. That should not have mattered. It took the jury less than 4 hours. Guilty. All 4 counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge, a colleague of Brenda's from the federal bench, handed down the maximum: 36 months in federal prison, a lifetime ban from law enforcement anywhere in the United States. His name entered into the National Decertification Index, a permanent record that would follow him for the rest of his life. Prescott stood in the courtroom in a gray suit, no badge, no gun, no uniform. His hands were clasped in front of him, the same hands that had slammed Brenda against her own car, the same hands that had clicked handcuffs onto the wrists of a federal judge.
Now those hands were shaking. He didn't speak at sentencing. His attorney asked for leniency. The judge denied it. But Prescott wasn't the only one who fell. Chief Harold Buchanan resigned the following week. Not voluntarily. The city council gave him a choice: resign or be terminated for cause. Adams' reporting had exposed what everyone inside the department already knew. Buchanan had spent years burying complaints, protecting officers like Prescott, and prioritizing department image over community safety. His resignation letter was 1 sentence long. He didn't apologize. The Whitmore Heights Police Department was placed under a federal consent decree. Mandatory reforms included body cameras for every officer on every shift, an independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power, a complete overhaul of internal affairs procedures, and comprehensive bias training. Not a 2-hour slideshow, but a 6-month program with real evaluations and real consequences for failure. Officer Craig Loomis received a 60-day suspension and was reassigned permanently to desk duty. His cooperation had earned him leniency, but not forgiveness. The narrator notes, Loomis wasn't a monster. He wasn't cruel. He was something almost worse. He was a man who saw cruelty happening right in front of him and chose silence. And silence, when you're wearing a badge, isn't neutral. It's a choice. And choices have costs. The community rallied. Hundreds gathered outside the Whitmore Heights Courthouse on sentencing day. They held signs. They chanted. They read the names of every person who had filed a complaint against Prescott. All 14 of them. Out loud, one by one, into a microphone. The national media covered the story for weeks. Legal commentators called it a turning point.
Civil rights organizations cited it in policy proposals. Law schools added it to their curriculum. And through all of it, Brenda Williams said almost nothing publicly. She let the evidence speak. She let the system work. She let the law, the same law Prescott had claimed to be, do exactly what it was designed to do. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp, the federal courthouse in Richmond, Virginia. Marble floors, dark wood paneling, the smell of old leather and polished brass. American flag standing tall beside the bench. Every seat in the gallery was taken. People standing along the back wall. Cameras from 6 networks lined up outside. Brenda Williams walked through the chamber doors in her judicial robes, black fabric flowing behind her. Head high, back straight. The same posture she had held on the side of that road. The same posture she had held in that holding cell. The same posture she had held when Buchanan said those 3 words and the whole station went silent. Except now, the robes matched the authority she had carried all along. Bailiff Raymond Torres stepped forward, a man who had served this courtroom for 18 years. He had announced dozens of judges. But today, his voice carried something different, something heavier, something earned. He took a breath and spoke clearly. All rise. The Honorable Judge Brenda Williams presiding. The courtroom stood. Every person, every seat. Lawyers, clerks, reporters, community members, law students who had driven 2 hours to be here. They all rose. In the front row, Denise Calloway sat in a navy blue dress. Her wooden cane rested against her knee. Her hands were folded in her lap. The same hands she had raised, trembling, on the side of Maple Street 5 days ago. The same hands that had been too afraid to reach for her own cane in the footwell of her daughter's car. Today, those hands were still. Today, those hands were steady. Tears ran down her face. But these were different tears. Not fear. Not humiliation. Not helplessness. These were the tears of a mother watching her daughter rise, not just to a bench, but above everything that had tried to pull her down. Brenda looked out across the courtroom. She saw her mother. She saw the faces of strangers who believed in what this moment meant. She saw young attorneys, black, brown, white, sitting in the gallery, watching, taking notes, dreaming. She placed her hands on the bench, the same hands that had been pressed flat against the cold roof of her own car, the same wrists that had been circled in steel. She sat down, and the courtroom sat with her. In the weeks that followed, Brenda established the Calloway Fellowship, named after her mother, a mentorship program for young attorneys from underrepresented communities, free legal training, courtroom shadowing, one-on-one guidance from sitting judges and senior litigators. The first class had 12 fellows. By the second year, there were 40. Denise attended every single opening ceremony. She sat in the front row each time, peppermints in her purse, calling every young lawyer baby and telling them they were going to change the world. And most of them believed her. Because when Denise Calloway told you something, after everything she had been through, you didn't argue. Brenda never sought fame from what happened that night. She never wrote a book, never did a talk show circuit, never turned her pain into a brand. She did one interview, just one. A local reporter asked her what she wanted people to remember about the incident. She said, "Don't remember me. Remember that it shouldn't have taken a title for that stop to be wrong. Every person in that car, judge or not, deserved to be treated with dignity. That's not a privilege. That's a right." Look, this story, fiction. But that feeling, being looked at like you're nothing, being guilty before you even say a word? Yeah, that's real. That happens every day, and it's on camera. So real talk, what are we gonna do about it? If you saw this happen right in front of you, not on a screen, not in a story, but right there on the sidewalk, under those flashing lights, would you hit record? Would you step forward? Would you say something? Or would you just keep walking? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. And if this story hit you somewhere deep, if it made your chest tight, if it made you angry, if it made you think, drop a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, because we've got more stories coming. And trust me, the next one hits even harder. But here's what I want you to carry with you tonight. Justice doesn't begin in a courtroom. It begins with people who refuse to look away. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't speaking louder. It's standing still when the whole world is telling you to bow.